I wanted to thank you again for this film, which I think, speaking for myself, but also other people on the programming committee, it was just sort of one of those films that we find ourselves just, our minds kept going back to it, to particular ideas, particular shots, particular questions that we had. So I'm excited to sit and talk through this with you. But I want to start with the obvious question of the origins of this story.
The origin of this story is I was thinking to make a film about a woman who would be a secondary character, maybe if we would approach more traditional narrative or what we're used to watching in cinema and maybe even reading in literature. And I was thinking about this woman who is so familiar maybe to me and all the other women in Georgia because she comes from very familiar background, and but in any other film she would be just a supporting character. And then I was in the village where my family is from, and my father introduced me to our relatives. These people are related to our family, who became Jehovah's Witnesses and who were extremely ostracized from the community. And frankly, I think my father was the only person who actually communicated with them and kept being friends with them. And these people lived in the place where they grew up and where they lived all their lives, but they felt so isolated and they felt almost like estranged from this place. And somehow these two came together for me, because I was thinking that if we talk about the identity, if we talk about who you are, and if we examine the question about what is it to be a woman also, you know, that's a very interesting question for me. And somehow it started to come together like this in the beginning. But I just want to say that there was a lot of anger involved in the beginning when I started to work on the script, because I was working on a script. It was a bit different in, originally, and then every time I would present it to people to read, I was getting comments about the character, about the main character. And somehow I think that has influenced me to even make her a bit even more radical in a way, because I felt that I just don't want people to tell me how the female characters should be portrayed in the films anymore. I just want to really look at this particular woman living in this particular environment. And I think it was a lot of things came together, but it started with this first, the thought that I want to make a film about a woman without romanticizing her, without making her nice or a support, like somebody who would be actually a supporting character in any other film, I would say.
I'm curious about to pick up on a thread of what you just said, the comments that you were getting about the kind of original, or you know, those versions of the character.
The comments were a lot. There were a lot of comments about people being okay, but if this is a film about emancipation, or if this is a film about a woman standing up for her own life, we want her to be more, you know, like positive example to the audiences. And I was just sitting there thinking that, you know, I grew up in a family that mostly consists of women and who are professionally pretty successful. But I think that the question of liberating yourself, or the question of going for something which you think is out there in life for you, is not such a simple question that you can just wake up and because you know that you can do it, you just do it. I think it's the process. And I can see that all the women in my family and my friends and women I know, we are going through the process. It's not easy. And I just did not want to make a character that does set up the positive example, but we don't feel her pain, because I don't think I think it's a painful process. And I really wanted it to be in the film. I wanted to look at it and really examine it.
Yeah, it's interesting for me to imagine what she must have existed like on the page, and what it must have been like for people to read the script. Because for me, so much of and you know, I don't know the extent to which you describe the things that are happening internally in the script, but for me, so much of of my way of understanding her or trying to understand her is beyond the things that you can totally script. It's so much a matter of environment and, you know, the way that you film her in space. So much of that contributes to how I understand her, that it's actually, I'm having a hard time imagining that I would get it really if I read it.
Well, I guess that's why often my presence there was necessary, so I could also talk to people and I would write my statement, how am I going to actually film it, because I do believe that when you as a director also write your script, you're writing a film, you're not just writing the script. And it's really important for me that people who read it understand what my intention is, like how am I going to actually film it, because otherwise, for me, it would be just literature, you know, something you read and you follow the plot and the story. But even the question of what is the story, you know, something we just follow or something we experience. And those questions were always there. And I'm very grateful to my producers who always were very helpful in that moment and always reached out to me and asked me to provide maybe more material. And I had a lot of material, like photos. And because while writing the film, I was always on location and I was taking photos and assembling the cast. And it was always the process that included everything, all the elements within itself. It was never just the script there.
Mm.
I do agree that it was not easy, actually.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, and I really, for me, that's a compliment, because I think it is hard to, for me at least, to describe in simple terms the number of things that this film seems to be about for me. I mean, I was thinking about this morning, just, and I'm curious about this from your perspective as the writer and director, that, you know, there is the through line of the religious persecution and the husband leaving and that stuff, but there are also these very curious tensions with the son, I felt. There's, of course, her on her own, and the way it feels like her sense of the world, or like this sense in like a sensory way, seems to shift. And that to me is a narrative in itself. So I'm so curious about how you conceived of the parallel overlapping stories, I think, here.
Thank you. That's thank you. That was my, I think that in life, life is never about one thing. So for me, like plot and the through line is there for structure, but the rest for me is cinema. So and cinema is about much more than just telling a story in just a traditional, I don't want to even call it a traditional narrative, because I think it's not really true. Traditional narrative is not about that. But I really wanted to make a film about this woman and her life cannot be just a religious conflict, and her life cannot be just her relationship with her son. And because of that, this film for me is about looking, and how what you see in one moment actually corresponds to something that you will see maybe in 1 hour. Because I do believe that cinema is cumulative. It accumulates something which goes beyond what you can say verbally, for example. It works on so many different levels. And because of that, to just go to your previous question, yes, it was not easy for people to read the script, because because that's actually where I'm interested in, to look at how characters exist in a space, how they live, how they inhabit the places, and how something which is even beyond my control starts to accumulate. And I think that in this film, there is this sense of dread that starts to accumulate, but we cannot really pinpoint, and we cannot say that, oh, it's because of this or because of that, but it somehow starts to like accumulate or like and overshadow her existence. And I'm very grateful to my actress, who really, really understood what I was trying to do. And she was very patient with me, because I was always searching, despite us storyboarding and doing the shot list. For me, the most important part is to connect with what's happening in front of the camera while I am actually filming it. Because I need to feel it. I need to feel that there is something which I have not written, I have not rehearsed. There is something which starts to appear, which is beyond my control. It's just there or not there in a way.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you said outright a sense of dread, because that was one of the things that really intrigued me at first. That I had this. I mean, granted, we open with the firebombing, so it makes sense to feel tense after that. But I was curious about how much uncertainty I felt, even just seeing her go into the kitchen at night for a glass of water or something. Just I really want to ask you about your visual style and your shooting style, and to your point about traditional narratives, the way that you use these longer takes or longer shots to construct tensions that a more classically constructed film would, use shot, reverse shot, or more ostentatious sort of shifts in staging and things like that. But you managed to do a lot of that just by keeping still or panning, maybe toward the end of the scene or something, but you seem really interested in the ways that you can do a lot of that work within a single frame. And I'm curious about that.
Well, I do believe in camera. I do believe that when you place the camera and when you know that, okay, this is the space, because I think that once you place the camera, you do create the space, which is within a world. And then I do believe that the way you look at things starts to absolutely change what's the reality around it. So in that sense, I only cut when it's actually necessary in the film. I believe that audience can immerse into the time of this film, and because if I would have shot reverse shot and the more like classical coverage, I doubt that I would achieve something to accumulate within the frame itself, within the time. I think because at the end, like in cinema, what you really deal with is time, and time defines so much. And it's the way she walks. I was working with an actress, and I was just asking her, okay, maybe you move from here to there, and she's such a skilled and such an experienced dramatic actress from the theater that for her it was a bit strange to discuss things like that. She was like, "Come on, I know how to walk. Like, you don't need to tell me." I was like, yes, I do know that you know how to walk, but yeah. And but for me, sometimes I would just stand next to the camera and count and try to catch the rhythm of how the time flows in this shot. And then I would just count out loud so she could follow the rhythm, and something starts to appear. And it's very difficult, of course, to explain on set this, but people just felt it. I think everybody was so, and it's very important for me also to create certain kind of environment on set in general, so we don't lose the connection with the material, and that helps in a way.
Yeah. Well, you're reminding me that I wanted to follow up on a point that you made earlier, but it relates to this, which is your interest in alienation. Is something that I'd love to hear more about, because it, I watched your shorts, and it seems like something that you are interested in beyond this film, and I'm curious, and women in alienation and within particular social environments and social relationships. And I'm very curious about your interest in that, your curiosity about that.
Well, I guess I grew up in this like very big Georgian family, and I guess since I was very little, women are trained for a specific kind of life. Like we're used to being told that if you have certain kind of or certain set of things in your life, here is your happiness. You should be happy. But what if you're not? And then that starts to create a sense of alienation, sense of not belonging. And sometimes those are really simple needs or simple wants. And I'm always interested in like really simple needs and wants of people. And I constantly, like in this film as well, I was constantly asking myself, do we really need to know and fully understand another in order to empathize, in order to love? Because it feels like that we want to fully know everything and we need to understand everything about another and then love them. But what about opacity? What about not wanting to be maybe fully understood? And
yeah, I mean, you're making me think of you know, the moment that when I was first watching it, that really that I really loved, which is of her. Would you call it a prank of sort of kind of playing dead, which was so striking to me because I had already by that moment, to your point about the things that we don't know about a character, and the things that we feel like we need to know in order to empathize. You know, there were things about her that I didn't understand, but I sensed that her relationship to her son and to her husband and to their needs, kind of in the imposition of their needs, was an ingredient in her kind of alienation. But I also, and not just in this scene, sense a sense of humor in her, if that's what I would call it, or even just you know, when she's talking to her son about lies, for example, and whether a horse can fly, you know, a sort of a gentleness to the ways that she kind of calls him out. Just varieties of behavior in her that don't feel inconsistent, but which you find these ways to just keep making me curious about what she's thinking, what she's feeling, and we'll of course have to talk about some of the trauma she undergoes, but even in the aftermath of that, it really becomes a matter of what is she thinking, what is she feeling, and how, and the gap between the things that she may be performing. It's just something you seem very attentive to in a way that I found really striking. And I have to admit, that scene of her lying in the grass, the first time I did sort of laugh, because the son's very he's a child.
Children think maybe a bit lighter in life than what we do.
Yeah, but you seem really interested in letting her have space to escape our explanations for her.
Yeah. Well, it's also a question about what is it to be a mother, really. I mean, we tend to think that you need to be perfect, and what does it mean to be a loving mother, and how much you would invest yourself. But being a mother it's really difficult. And my sister is a mother. She has 2 children, and I do observe how it's daily work and it's not always easy. But we do think that it's just all like fluffy, you know, pink roses, and it's not. But then I was like, this particular scene, I was just thinking that, yes, maybe it's extreme, and it is extreme, and I don't know who would, like, I don't know a person who would do it, but this character, she does it because in a way it's also showing the harshness of reality, because every child at some point has a question, what if their mother will not be around one day? And for her, maybe it's the way to protect him from the reality, also to get him to see something outside of the bubble of a religion, and like the stories, which are almost fantastic stories that he learns through his connection with the religion. I think she just wants to bring some sort of reality into his life. And to me, even it's harsh. It's absolutely not a nice thing to do, but there is some kind of love in that for me, because I do genuinely believe that she really loves her son, and maybe it's also for her, it's the way to detach, or to start to understand that maybe there is a way to detach from the life she has with her husband and with her son. It's again a complex relationship, because it's never really one thing. Even relationship with mothers and their children.
Yeah, and her relationship to her own mother and father, that conversation was really striking. But you know, I also think back to early in the film when the husband says things like, "Why can't you be a normal person or support me like a kind of normal person?" And everything that you're saying about being a mother, even in the absence of the husband for much of the film, I feel like also there's a lot of clarity to her experience as a wife. Even just this question of the ongoing problem of we're being persecuted here. What are we going to do about it? And it not being up to her, really seems, you know, like, and that's an early thing that you plant in the film, and that's something that I feel like I sit with for the rest of the film.
She's not even being asked, and this person, he's a leader of a religious community, but he doesn't necessarily need to be a leader of the religious community as well. He can be a very successful businessman, or a man of any other profession, who just has his wife there as an attribute of his success in a way, and his social status. I mean, she's not involved in decision making at all. And I do know women all around the world, unfortunately, who live like that. She's excluded from such important moments in her life. Like, she doesn't have a say, and he tells her that give me some time, and you know that I'll figure it out. He never says that we'll figure it out, but he considers that's being a normal person. And I think that because of this, I mean, alienation, for me, it's always the question about, if you don't fit in anymore in something which is familiar to you, how do we move into something which is not familiar to you yet? So for me, this film is this moment of transition. She's moving from something which she knows into something that she does not know. And I think that's why maybe it's painful for her in the first place.
I want to talk about your approach to the violence in this film, and the sexual violence, of course, but also even just, you know, the opening scene. I would love to hear more about how you thought through, you know, because depicting sexual violence, depicting any kind of violence, is always, I think, a question of, so how are we going to, what are we going to show? What is going to make it in front of the camera? And what are we doing with how we depict these things? What is the idea? And I would love to hear about how you conceptualized, and then with your actors, figured out a way to make that make sense for the film.
It was actually a critical question for me, because I don't want violence to be just you know, there for an effect, or, you know, to just make people talk about it. So and even in my short films there is violence also, but it's a critical, because I do believe that violence is just part of life, and in one way or another, people around us, or we ourselves, go through it, and sometimes it's extreme, and we can't just own it. We can't just cut it out from the life of this woman. We can't just film part of it and then say that, oh, like, the rest you need to imagine, because I actually really was determined to follow everything which is happening in her life. And sometimes maybe for some audiences it might be like unnecessary moments, but sometimes it's a huge moment. And I wanted to look at it straightforward. This film for me is about seeing the life of another, and another in general. And because of that, in the first scene especially, it starts as one thing, and then it turns into something totally different, and it's very violent. And I think that's how we encounter violence in life also. It's never just separated events. It's just, there is a connection between banal and ordinary, and then violence on the other hand. It's always the part of the fabric of one thing. And because of that, when we were thinking about the sexual violence in the film, I was always sure that I don't want to cut it. I don't want to have, I don't want to emphasize anything. I don't want to bring audience's attention to just like her face, or to connect them maybe emotionally more. I don't know how much more I just wanted to film it from a distance where actually an accidental passerby could pass by on that distance, and maybe would not say anything, or would say, I don't know. In this film, nobody intervenes. And I just wanted to look, and the rest is up to the audience, like how much people will feel. Or I still do believe that it's difficult to watch this scene, and I did not need to get more involved. It's just what it is on its own. And it's very difficult for me. It was very difficult for me to film it, because how do you approach this? It was very, we were talking with an actress a lot about this, and she was very, we did only 2 takes, and the first take is in the film. Second take was, I guess, for safety, but we knew that it was not, it was so difficult physically for her to do, and she really wanted to do it on her own. And really, like, for the actor, it was super difficult for them. And we knew that it's just 1 take, and I did not want to ask the actors to do too much of it, because it was traumatizing even for the crew members actually to be there. So I tried to keep a distance, because I felt that if I get closer, that I somehow it did not feel right. Maybe ethically, it just did not feel right to get closer. So I needed to have a distance from the scene.
Right, and something we mentioned off camera before we started, but over the course of making this, the script changed a lot. I'm curious about how these elements shifted or changed over the course of your conceiving of the film.
Well, this particular scene with the sexual violence, this is exactly how it was written. And we read it with actors many times, and they knew it was in a way part of, they really took it in. It was part of their body memory in a way, because I knew that it just happens once. And if they do something differently, they're just in a moment, and we just accept it. Yes, it was part of the script, and many people who read it was not easy for people to accept, because honestly, one of many comments was that, oh, why does not she take a revenge, or why does not she do something more, like in legal terms, against this man? But again, I go back to the question of, I don't think it's that easy. You know, it's easy to talk about it, but I don't think that people who go through this kind of experiences in their life. I did a lot of research. I was like actually researching for a year about for the character of a detective, because I clearly think that he's not fully mentally stable, and I really wanted to understand him. And I was researching about the victims of sexual violence, and I am convinced that it's extremely difficult to stand up and to talk about it. And I did not want to just make a film which would give a sense of instant gratification to the audience, thinking that, oh, it's the revenge film and it's the justice exists in the world, because I think that I'm not sure it does. And I think we have a long way to go to give the voice to people who have many unpleasant experiences to talk about, maybe, and to seek justice. And it's not easy. So.
Yeah, and the question of what justice would even mean when we're talking about someone posing as, you know, or you know, like a detective, is what is it, you know? What would that amount to, right?
Yeah, where would she go? Like, she goes to the police, and it was really important for me that she goes to the police in the first quarter of film, and we already know that she can't really do much about anything that's happening in her life. And I just would not feel that it would be true if I would make her to go again. And no, I don't want to lie. I just refuse to lie. I refused to somebody else to make decisions for me in my film, because there are things I want to talk about and I consider them important to be talked about. And it was really difficult to finance this film, and I was convinced that sooner or later it would happen, because I did believe in it, and there were people around me who really believed in it. So, and I'm very grateful to them.
Yeah, I'm struck by you saying that you spent a lot of time researching not only how victims respond to this situation, but also his character, because what struck me both times that I watched the film, and this might be also a matter of your emphasis on the duration of a shot or of a scene, is that in both the apartment encounter and the later sort of outright assault scene, his desire to humiliate her in particular came through in a way that I don't think always comes through in scenes like this. Like it was him saying, "I'm sorry," as he's leaving her apartment, and of course, the rubbing mud and et cetera onto her face, and the sort of, just adding to this sense of disgust that he has for her, felt mutually revealing, felt revealing in some ways of his desires in a way that surprised me, frankly. It seemed like you really did think a lot about his role in the sexual violence as bigger than just, the ways that we talk about sexual assault and violence and power and these things. You add these elements of humiliation and shame. Yes. that really stood out to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I was researching, I started to, it was very difficult for me emotionally to do this research, but I really needed to understand, because how I would talk to them, and actually actor, he was researching a lot, and we spoke a lot about the character, and I think that he was taken by these desires which were not very pleasant to him as well, but he gave in much earlier than he appears in the film. He accepted who he is. And I think because she does not stop him in a way, is something that makes him to even want to humiliate her more, because where is the limit for him for satisfaction of his unhealthy needs or wants or desires? Like, because she does not do anything, he wants to humiliate her even more. And I think that there is the nature of violence in a way, because he does one thing and she does not respond, and then he goes more, and in a way for him it's frustrating also. And we were talking about that, how that he is a frustrated character who as well cannot fit in anywhere. And he is in my understanding, he is the weapon in the hands of the system that uses him also, which is corrupt on many levels. And he is the tool they have to perform outside of the system, because we never know also. And there was a question for me, if I need to indicate like how much he improvises when he humiliates her, and how much does the system he belongs to is aware of who this person is. And I think that it doesn't really matter at the end, because he is part of the system. So that's prosecutes this woman in a very like indirect but very violent way.
Yeah, and this is part of what I was getting at earlier when I said that I felt like you have so many, so many stories here that you're telling, that even the first time I watched it, I couldn't even make up my mind as I was watching that he wasn't one of the firebombers. And look, it seemed like it is about this just broader world of these persecuting forces, that it pinpointing his origins, even is he a real detective, or I almost, it's like it felt very slippery to me. I wondered if that slipperiness was deliberate on your part.
Yes, it was, because for me, I mean, he is a real detective, because for an actor, for example, it was even a question, it was at some point a question if he really exists or not. And for me, he does exist, he's a real detective, but of course, like, he's also so many other things at the same time. It just happens all that in that moment he had the power and he could do it, but we never know what other forces would also do if they would be able to do it. So for me, it was always this force or the evil that is there in the moment, and goes fully for persecution. I think I was even thinking that would the firebomber, if it was a firebomber, how far would he go if it was a firebomber? And I was thinking that pretty far, maybe too, So I thought that he's a detective, and we do see him going into the car, the police car, and then they talk in the bedroom about him. And yes, he's a detective, but there are also other forces there. I don't think they're less, they cause less harm, So.
Yeah. You're making me think back to when you were talking earlier about responses to the script, and it occurs to me that, and something you just said about him, and him perhaps wanting to humiliate her more because she doesn't sort of fight him. It occurs to me that maybe passivity, or something that seems like passivity under persecution, is very uncomfortable for people, because it's probably not the way that we would imagine that we would want to perform or behave in these situations. That's something that even just talking to you, that is making me really think more about the energies that I'm sensing here, that I wonder if you sense that as well. And that seems like a risk, like a kind of a heroine that, to my mind, doesn't feel passive, but because of things like, the things she does with her son, for example, but that someone might read her that way, feels like a risk that you're taking.
It was, yes, it was a risk, and some people would actually straightforward tell me that I would need to change things, and I don't believe, because I would not believe in it, because it's risky to make films that you believe in. And as a director of this film, I do stand behind it fully. I do believe that it's not comfortable to see the truth or to see the reality in front of us. And I think that we need to just, maybe it's over to make women characters that are comfortable to watch on the screen. I don't want her to be comfortable. And I was like, comfortable to, people were like, oh yeah, maybe she needs to revenge. I don't think so. This particular character, I would lie if I would do it. And I just don't want to lie, and it's risky, but
I was going to say, I think as responses go, wanting her to have some kind of revenge does not feel at all like what this movie is interested in.
I don't know. I was talking to my sister the other day, and I was thinking that, I really think that maybe I'm not a very comfortable woman, and I do know many women around me who just, we don't want to be comfortable anymore. And what I do, okay, it's not comfortable also, but maybe it's time to actually do it, to start to look at. I know women in Georgia, they don't. They don't even know maybe how to connect with their wants, or with their desires.
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to talk to you about, because I feel like thinking back to your conversation with the actress about how to walk, I feel like you built that even into character's bodily presence, just the way that she moves through her home. I'm curious about that. Like, am I making that up? It does feel like you are really trying to give me that in just the way that she moves. It's not even a matter of things that she has to say outright. Even I just feel it
I
from
think
her.
there is even sense of alienation for me even there. And even working on her costume, we were working on the costume designer, and sometimes I was thinking that it's almost like a doll. Like when you look at her, how she's like perfectly dressed in a way, and it's casual, but it's not at the same time. And maybe this is something she knows how she should how she should dress, and there is certain image that she needs to look like. And actress, she has a really incredible plasticity, and she really knows how to uh, actually inhibit and to be in the shot, to be in the frame. And we were always just and also finding this house. Initially, I found another house which had lower ceilings, and I just could not. Like I would place the camera, and we just knew that no, it needed to be a house which had more space, when even the walls are just too large around her. Even there I can feel that I don't think she even belongs there, and we don't feel her fully belonging, even the way she lives in this house as well. So um, yeah, we were talking a lot about that actually, how, like, what's the pace of her step, and does she ever really walk fast? Is she ever in a hurry? Is she ever late somewhere? How does she move from the room to room? Does she have a purpose even always to move around the house? And I do have my thought. I don't want to say maybe everything, but I mean, it's yes, it was discussed, and we worked a lot on the character, because the actress, when she read the script, she immediately came back, and she really, like, I'm blessed to meet her. She really wanted to be in the film, and it's important for me, because she told me, when she came to me, she also said that, I am in the point of my career and in my life when I want to be like acting to parts of women like this. I want to portray this woman. And then she started to talk to me in the beginning about breathing, and that this woman does not even dare maybe to breathe too much. She's always like somehow tries to remain calm, but not because that's how she feels, but because this is
Right.
knows how to live in a way.
Right. I want to make sure that I ask about, because I have relatives who are Jehovah's, but I only sort of know what I know through that kind of tie, and I understand you have ties there as well. I'm curious about how much of what we're like the world that you sculpt of her home life and the choices she does and does make are informed not only by that, but by being specifically the wife of the leader of that community. Was something that I
Yeah.
kept wondering as I watched.
Well, I was reading a lot, and I was also I got to know a lot about the community. But at the end, I was determined to make a film about this particular woman, because I really don't want to say that specifically here or there things like this happen. But because everybody lives their own lives, that doesn't matter with religious groups people belong to. It's still the individual experience and choices that people make. But I do know that there are constraints, obviously, and the responsibilities that people, like women who are wives of the community leaders have, and there are certain expectations that this woman, that there are towards these women. And that was really meticulously researched, and I worked on that a lot, but it's just structural in that sense. But at the end, especially in Georgia, where the community is persecuted, I was like really thinking about, I don't want to point fingers at anyone, and everybody makes their individual choices. I just do know that living in the patriarchal way, like structured societies, maybe it's a bit, not maybe, but certainly it's more difficult for women. So
yeah. Yeah, and you know, I've been thinking during this conversation about how late in the film, when we sort of when we encounter her mother and we talk about the father, you know, between that end of the spectrum and her son and the class that she teaches, something that I start wondering by the end of the film is not only about her future, but also what kind of man her son is going to grow up to be, and in the context of having her as a mother, having his father as a father, and the things that he's already displaying in his personality in those contexts. It really made me think, man, I wonder what this kid, you know, is going to be like, given the models of men that we have in the movie, but also for her mom's misery in some ways. Is that her future?
And we do see that mom says that, and by the way, this is my mother who plays the part. And she says to the younger sister that about the younger sister, she says that I always tell her that she needs to study to get something better in her life. But we do see that maybe mother already, she does say it, but she fails because again, we go back to the question of that, is it so easy when everything around you functions in a certain way? Just saying things maybe does not help, or does not help much. And I do think that there is a tragedy. Mother, for me, is a very tragic character in a way, because she looks at two of her daughters who she knows that maybe she could not give them some kind of example, but could she? So there is, like, for me, this film is really about you know, points of no return in a way. Like, these characters constantly go to the point where, if we as an audience maybe think that, oh, if only they could stop and reflect and maybe change something, but they don't. They carry on living. And I do find particularly that a very like emotionally, it's touching me emotionally a lot. So
yeah, and that really puts a really great language to how I felt about the mother when I watched, which is that she is in the tide of her life, and there doesn't seem to be room for a hope for something more than what she has. She really, I like that you called her kind of a tragic character, because she really, in addition to the fact that conversation's very hard because of the things that aren't being discussed and the things that do get discussed in their wake about, you know, is the daughter cheating, or you would never tell me even if you were, and these things. I just felt like I was seeing someone from the other side who is beyond the point of being able to take hold of her life. Whereas the main character, I hope, still has you know, time ahead of her. But the mother, I felt very sad for.
Yes, we were talking, like, we didn't talk much with my mother about this character, because I mean, she's not a professional actress. She never acted, so I knew that I cannot really explain much. But when she read the script, she knew it. She knew what the film was about, because of the women of her generation, because her own experiences. And even that was the proof to me that that was something which was true. Like, I did not even need to explain. Like, she just knew, and she just did it, like, because she connected with the character a lot. And I think that, like, it's she definitely, as a character, definitely, I think that she's already beyond the point of no return. She doesn't, and she's tragic because her love cannot really change anything anymore.
What was it like working with your mom, to end on a brighter note, hopefully?
It was super difficult, I would say, because first of all, she tries to not get involved ever in my work, and because she's always so emotional and she worries about me and what I do. And But then when I asked her, she read the script and then she said, you know, I want to do this for you. But it was so emotional for her, and for me too, you know, in a way I was feeling guilty in some place in the process, because she's not an actress, so she was so just there the way she really was feeling in a moment, and it was painful because I do know that she was bringing her own personal experiences to the screen, and I could see it. So we could not really talk about it because it was a very delicate process. I could not just talk to her about it, but I knew that there was the moment which, you know, it was very strange for me. I knew that doesn't matter what will make it to the film and what not at the end. This is something which my mother is giving me, which is just are going to stay with me like forever. You know?
I like ending on that note. And I think we're out of time, but it was such a pleasure to talk to you about your film, and I'm so excited for people to see it and talk about it and think about it.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting for me to talk. It's very new. So, thank you very much. It was very interesting.
Yeah, thank you.